Hello, my name is Aaron Larry, and welcome to our election special here at Channel 16 WOWL Studios. Today I'm here with Mr. Roland Danny Martin. He's running for the district house. He's running for the House of District 150. It is an honor to have you here in our studios. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, like your education, where you went to school, where you grew up, your childhood.
Great. First, I want to thank you, Aaron, and Channel 16 for hosting this election special. It's something that is very special to me. I was here a long time ago when I was a candidate for House of Representatives several years ago. You've asked me to tell you a little about myself. As you mentioned, I'm Danny Martin. I am a Democratic candidate for House District 150, which includes the towns of Van Buren, Madawaska, Grand Isle, Frenchville, Sanagat, Sinclair, Cross Lake, and Madawaska Lake. A little about myself. I was born on Long Lake in Sinclair, Maine. My family owned a family business there called the Martin Sporting Camps and Martin's Grocery. Until I went into the military, where I became an artillery officer, I spent most of my time managing and helping my mom and dad work that business. My life experiences include, as I mentioned, running that small business for a while. I later went into the legislature in the 107th, 109th legislature, where I served one term in the House, and I served 2 terms in the state Senate. At the time, I represented Madawaska and the St. John Valley as a whole. After serving in the legislature, I moved back home. My family and I bought a family restaurant in Frenchville, Rosette's Restaurant, where we owned that for several years. And I also became the Frenchville town manager. I was there for a couple of years. And then we moved to Madawaska, and I became the town manager for Madawaska. I was here for, I believe, 6 or 7 years. After that service, when the legislature created the county government form, the county administrator form of government, I became county administrator. I was appointed by the 3 county commissioners, and I was county administrator for the entire county for about 15 years. After that, got a phone call from Governor Baldacci back in 2003 asking me if I wanted to serve in his cabinet, which I fondly accepted. And for 8 years, I was the commissioner of the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So I've been fortunate, Aaron. I've been able to serve the public not only in state government, but in local, county, and state government. As I mentioned, we also own family businesses, and until recently, my wife and I had owned Lakeview Lodge, which is a sporting camps lodge up on Long Lake in Sinclair.
So after that long list of all those impressive places you served on, what made you interested in politics? Like, how did you come into it?
Well, ironically, at a very, very young age, like I mentioned, I served 6 years in the legislature, and I simply ran because I thought there was a need for a strong voice in the legislature. I was quite young at the time. As a matter of fact, I shared with you earlier that my 3 children graduated from Madawaska High School, and at the time I only had a daughter. Here's why I need and I want to run again this year. Years ago, Aroostook County, back in the 107th, 8th, and 9th legislature when I was there, we were served by 16 representatives in the county. We had 3 1/2 state senators. When I'm elected, and I go back in January, we're going to be served by 9 House members and just 2 state senators. And clearly that's because of reapportionment and the decline in population. Now when you take a look at the entire legislature, you've got 151 House members and 35 state senators. You can very well see that with 9 House members, Aroostook County has got its work cut out for them. I have the experience, and I think more now than ever, the St. John Valley needs someone that has that experience, someone who can represent them in Augusta, someone who understands the legislative system, someone who knows exactly who to go to when you want to get things done. and someone that'll come home on weekends and meet with his constituents when they're in need of help.
Okay, so well, as you know, Madawaska is a paper mill town, and it's all over the news lately that the Verso mill in Bucksport will be closing. What are your thoughts on the recent decision to close down that mill, and also about the paper making industry? How important do you think the paper making is with the mills that's in our town?
Not only is Verso in Bucksport closing, but so is the Millinocket area.
Yep.
As a former town manager in Madawaska here, I know full well the hardships that this is going to cause to those communities, and quite frankly, the hardship that it would cause if the paper mill here in town would close. Unfortunately, what needs to happen is the paper industry. The paper industry in Maine is still quite viable.
Yep.
I'm convinced of that, especially here up north. But what needs to happen is the mills are going to need to retool themselves, confront the situations that now exist in the 21st century, and the communities that they reside in are also going to have to retool and meet the different challenges. You know, back when I was town manager, Fraser Paper at the time paid 60-some-odd% of the tax base.
Yep.
You know, and I know that that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think, like I mentioned, the paper industry is still viable, but there's a lot of competition out there from China and throughout the world. It's a global economy, as you well know. And quite frankly, what's sad about the whole situation is, unlike the United States and the state of Maine, these countries subsidize these paper mills and their large industries. So I guess my answer would be, to your question, what do you think about it? I think it's tough. I think it's a challenge, but I think the paper mills in Maine are still viable.
Okay. And further in life, what were your thoughts beyond education? You know, example like public schooling and college and the tuition that college students coming in the fall are going to be having to pay.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question because that's an important question. Back in the 70s, I believe, the voters of Maine, through referendum, passed a piece of legislation that mandated the state to pay 55% of the total cost for education. When I was there, that never happened. And since the 70s, the state has never funded the cost of education at 55%. And what happens as a result of that, you either have to cut positions like you've had to do here in Madawaska, and the local property tax payer subsidizes what the legislature lacks to fund. It wasn't all that bad until the last 2 years with the current administration. They've literally wiped out revenue sharing in Maine. They've literally wiped out the general assistance funds, and as you well know, they've not funding education as they could. Now, you know and I know that just this morning, the University of Maine system had to cut their budget by $7 million. That's unfortunate. I'm totally convinced. For example, I'm quite familiar with USM in the Portland area. My two boys graduated from there. And there's also a campus, as you well know, in Augusta. Maybe it's time to start thinking of merging those areas, as much as I'd hate to see that. But maybe that's what needs to happen. The cuts were necessary, and if the cuts hadn't happened, I'm not sure it's been totally approved by the Board of Trustees yet, but if those cuts hadn't happened or don't happen, tuition costs are going to be increases. Like I mentioned, I've got two sons that graduated from USM not all that long ago, and they're still paying their student loans, and they will for a long, long time. So there's a hardship there, and it's quite difficult for our young students to go to college and not have to come out of college with a nice degree, but a lot of money to have to spend for their college student loans.
Well, thank you. Would you like to add anything else to our viewers and voters watching?
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you for this great interview. You did a great job, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you.
I just want to talk to the audience for a couple of seconds. Again, I want to thank Channel 16 for this interview. On November 4th, the voters of House District will be electing their state representative. There's a clear distinction between myself and my opponent. As a lifelong resident of the Valley, I understand the concerns of the community. I have the experience in the legislative process, and I'll be there when you need me. I'm also fortunate to have received several endorsements, a couple of which I'm very proud of. I've been endorsed by the Maine AFL-CIO. I've been endorsed by Maine Education Association and the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. Now, on November 4th, I'll be voting, and for those of you that are thinking about the bear referendum, I would strongly urge you to vote no for that issue because it's important to our economy here in Maine. And as a former Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife, I'm very familiar with the great work that our wildlife biologists are doing. Again, on November 4th, I want to thank you, and I ask the voters of House District 150 for their vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in here, Mr. Martin. My name is Aaron Larry, and I'm in Channel 16 Studios, and I'm signing out.